Every good lie requires an even better memory. When the captain handed me this case, the body was still inside the house. Patrol had already taped off the perimeter. The forensics team was just setting up. No one had time to build a theory yet. That's exactly why I preferred these early hours, before the facts were turned into someone else's conclusions. The Allison estate stood in one of the quietest neighborhoods in Dallas. A manicured lawn, trimmed bushes, warm light bleeding through the windows. The last place you'd expect to see flashing police cruisers. The neighbors watched from the sidewalk in total silence. When I stepped inside, the house greeted me with a heavy, flawless quiet. Over the years, I've learned one thing. Sometimes the silence tells you more about a crime than any scream. Nora Allison was in her study, sitting in a large leather armchair by the fireplace. From a distance, it looked like she had simply drifted off to sleep. But that impression vanished the moment you stepped closer. Dr. Brooks, our chief medical examiner, had already finished his preliminary walkthrough. The faint, narrow mark on her throat pointed quietly toward asphyxiation. The final autopsy would have to confirm it. On Nora's left wrist was an elegant vintage watch. The glass face was completely shattered, the hands frozen precisely at 1914. While the tech's camera flashed, I kept my eyes on her arm. Nora was dark-skinned. A distinct, untanned pale strip of skin showed where the watch usually rested. And for some reason, the watch was sitting just a fraction higher than its usual spot. I didn't try to solve it right then. I just made a quick note in my book and kept moving. I slowly walked the perimeter of the room. The desk was meticulously organized. Next to the laptop lay documents for her current project. Architectural blueprints, color swatches, material samples. Nora was an architect. She and Victor co-owned the firm. She handled the designs. He managed the contractors. These working materials were a permanent fixture of their lives. Meanwhile, the techs were finishing sweeping the floor. Dust, paper clips, a stray button, and a tiny metallic fragment of unknown origin. In the official report, they logged it under a single line. Metallic piece. Origin unverified. Back then, no one gave it a second thought. Neither did I. Victor Allison was the first to speak with me. He didn't look like a man who had lost his composure. He spoke calmly, minimal details, answering only what was asked. On its own, that meant nothing. People process grief differently. Next to him sat an old, noticeably worn leather briefcase, heavily scratched compared to his expensive tailored suit. Victor explained it was a gift from his father after graduation. He had replaced the locks and lining over the years, but never thought of parting with the case itself. Some things just become a part of you. According to Victor, he went straight to a charity gala after work. He never stopped by the house. Dozens of high-profile guests saw him there. When the event ended, he returned home and found Nora. Then he called the police. In those first few hours of the investigation, his story looked flawless. While the forensics team continued their work, I asked Victor a few more questions. Nothing was missing from the house. No money, no jewelry, no documents. This immediately ruled out a robbery. Someone wasn't interested in the house. Someone was interested in Nora herself. When a killer takes nothing, the circle of suspects usually narrows quickly. Most often, the answer has to be found among the people the victim knew well. I asked to prepare a list. The husband, the assistant, the former business partner, a few company employees, and immediate relatives. It was with them that we had to start. The autopsy results arrived the next morning. Dr. Brooks confirmed the preliminary conclusion. The cause of death was strangulation. He also determined the estimated interval of death. The heat from the fireplace prevented an exact time from being named. The high temperature could noticeably distort the usual post-mortem changes. The middle of the resulting range almost coincided with the moment Nora's watch stopped. So far, everything looked logical. Therefore, the watch raised no questions. Not for me either. Something else was far more important. Why did Nora allow the killer to get so close? There were almost no signs of a struggle. This meant that next to her was a person she trusted. First on the list was Ellie, Nora's assistant. For the last few weeks, Nora had almost lived at work. The company was preparing a major contract. On that day, she left the office earlier than usual and was going to finish her work at home. During the conversation, one detail surfaced. In the evening, the suppliers were supposed to bring new material samples to the office. Back then, I just made a note in my notebook. I didn't know yet that this exact detail would later change the entire investigation. A few months ago, Nora had a scandalous break from a joint project with a former business partner. The reason was money. The motive looked convincing enough to check it first. The check took less than an hour. During the presumed time of Nora's death, he was reading an evening lecture at the university. This was confirmed by the professors, the students, and the faculty staff. Too many witnesses to doubt. Sometimes, an investigation moves forward not because you find the guilty party, but because you eliminate the innocent one in time. By the end of the day, there was one less suspect. I returned once more to where the answers usually appear fastest, to the crime scene. A re-examination rarely brings new evidence. More often, it forces you to look differently at the ones already found. The house was empty. I walked through the office once more. The desk, the chair, the fireplace. On the grate, there were traces of recently burned paper. I asked the forensics team to check the ash again. I wasn't interested in the contents. I wanted to understand if the fire could have played some role in the crime itself. The answer came the next day. The experts confirmed only two facts. Shortly before Nora's death, something had indeed been burned in the fireplace, and the heat from the fire could have noticeably distorted the usual post-mortem changes. This examination yielded nothing more, but the second fact was enough. I opened the autopsy materials again, and for the first time, I thought not about the cause of death, but about how accurately we had determined its time at all. Dr. Brooks had determined only an estimated interval of death. The watch, however, showed one single minute, 1914. Until this moment, it hadn't bothered me. Now it was quite the opposite. Forensic medicine almost never gives such accuracy. The watch gave it too confidently. For the first time in the entire investigation, I thought that they might not be suggesting the time of death, but imposing it. I remembered the bright strip of skin on Nora's wrist again. During the first inspection, the watch seemed displaced to me. Back then, I gave it no importance. Now I decided to check it more closely. The back cover of the case didn't fit tightly, as if it had been opened very recently. A few hours later, a watchmaker confirmed my suspicions. The case had indeed been opened. The hands were stopped manually. After that, the watch was closed back up and the glass was shattered. Now I knew for sure. 1914 was not the time of death. It was the time the killer wanted to force us to believe. If the watch was faked, the entire investigation had to be reviewed anew. The actual time of death could differ by almost 40 minutes. It was these 40 minutes that previously seemed insignificant. Now they were becoming the most important interval of the entire investigation. I opened Victor's statement again. After work, he went straight to a charity evening. He did not stop by the house. Previously, this phrase looked ordinary. Now, it required verification. I reconstructed Victor's route. He left the office around 7 o'clock. At the charity evening, he was first confidently seen only at 8:05. The direct road took about 25 minutes. For almost 40 minutes, no one confirmed his movements. I checked another route. From the office to the house, 15 minutes. From the house to the venue of the evening, another 20. There was enough time to meet Nora, to kill her, to change the setting in the office, and still make it to the event. Previously, this possibility remained unnoticed. Now it became obvious. After the actual time of death came into question, I began checking the case materials all over again. I showed the crime scene photos to Ellie. She had worked alongside Nora for many years. Sometimes it is a person's habits that help notice what no investigator will see. Ellie looked at the pictures for a long time. Then she pointed out one detail. On the desk lay a sealed pallet of samples. According to her, the supplier brought it to the office only in the evening. Nora had already left for home by that time. I immediately remembered our first conversation. Back then, this information seemed insignificant to me. Now, it did not. The check took only a few hours. The supplier confirmed that he handed the pallet personally to Victor. This meant only one thing. Between the office and the charity evening, Victor did stop by the house after all. He lied. On its own, this did not prove murder yet. But, for the first time, his flawless alibi ceased to be flawless. The fact that Victor lied about his route changed a lot. But it still didn't prove murder. A lie on its own does not make a person a killer. I needed a piece of evidence that would link Victor to Nora's office. I opened the list of material evidence again. Among them, a small metallic fragment of unknown origin was still listed. On the first day of the investigation, it seemed like an accidental find. Now it did not. I asked Emily, my attentive partner, to pull up the photos from the charity evening. Sometimes the answer appears only when you ask the right question. The photos were brought just an hour later. Emily and I decided to go through the case from the very beginning once more. Sometimes, a new piece of evidence doesn't appear. It's enough to look at the ones already found in a new way. The photos from the crime scene were laid on the table. The inspection reports, the bags of material evidence, a button, a few paper clips, the metallic fragment of unknown origin, and everything else the forensics team had gathered in Nora's office on the first day. Emily arranged the photos of the charity evening in chronological order. I went through them one by one. In one of the pictures, Victor was standing sideways. His old leather briefcase was slung over his shoulder. It was exactly then that my gaze involuntarily jumped from the picture to the table. Something was missing from the side strap of the briefcase. I looked at the material evidence again. The small metallic fragment, the size, the shape, the attachment point. This still proved nothing. But for the first time, I had a theory that could be tested. On its own, a coincidence still proved nothing. I needed to understand if the metallic fragment really belonged to Victor's briefcase. During our next meeting, I intentionally told him that the experts had finished a re-examination of the material evidence. Among the objects found, there was one whose importance we had previously underestimated. Now, It only remained to establish which item it was a part of. I named neither the object nor the place where it was found. To an innocent person, these words would mean nothing, but the guilty one would immediately understand what was being discussed. Right after the conversation, I asked Emily to organize an outside surveillance. Now, the investigation no longer depended on me, but on Victor himself. The surveillance continued almost until midnight. For the first few hours, Victor did not leave the house. Around 11 in the evening, Emily reported that his car was heading towards the office. The working day had ended long ago. He had no meeting scheduled. A few minutes later, Victor walked out of the building. In his hands, he held a small sports bag. I realized that he had made his decision and ordered to detain him. The police officers stopped Victor a few steps from his car. For the first time in the entire investigation, he looked bewildered. He no longer looked me in the eyes. His gaze was fixed on the bag. I asked to open it. Inside lay the old strap from his briefcase, exactly the one he had once replaced with a new one. Dr. Brooks, back during the autopsy, had noted that the mark on her neck was left by a narrow, flat object with stiff edges. The experts compared the dimensions of the strap with the strangulation mark. They matched. Then, the metallic part found in the office was applied to the attachment point. It fit perfectly. Only after this did the experts finally establish its origin. It was the brass keeper of the briefcase strap. At that moment, the entire chain finally came together. The fake watch hid the actual time of death. The heat of the fireplace explained the error in determining it. The pallet proved that Victor lied about his route. The brass keeper of the briefcase strap linked the strap to the crime scene, and the strap itself turned out to be the murder weapon. I no longer needed to build theories. The evidence made all the conclusions itself. 4 months later, the court found Victor Ellison guilty of first-degree murder. Until the very end, he claimed he was the victim of a chain of accidental coincidences. When it was all over, I mentally returned to this case once more. Victor had calculated almost everything, altered the time of death, built a convincing alibi, made sure that the investigation looked for the answer in the wrong place for as long as possible. But any carefully thought-out plan remains vulnerable. Not because of chance, because of the person who believed in it too much. Victor was sure that he had already won. That is exactly why. He didn't get rid of the old strap right away. He believed that it would never interest anyone again. He made a mistake only once, but it was exactly this mistake that cost him his freedom.